We have some changes in our panel this morning, but I'm happy that we'll have so great panelists today, and I'd like to introduce Mr. Jakub Jakóbowski, Senior Fellow with the OSW China Programme, and I'll have some questions concerning China and Central Europe also. Veronika Movchan. Veronika is Academic Director of one of the best Ukrainian centers for economic studies, actually Center for Economic Studies of the Institute of Economic Research and Political Consultations. Online we'll have Tana Alexandra from Romania. Tana Alexandra, hello. Nice to see you. And also Michal Lebduška joining us today.
Recording in progress.
Oh, great. Great news. So we will speak this morning about infrastructure, adaptation, etc. But I'll have three key questions for our panelists today. First question will be concerning participation of Central Europe of rebuilding and modernization of Ukrainian infrastructure, and Ukraine is this. Also, we'll speak about investments, how to find funding for the Ukrainian infrastructure rebuilding. And also we'll speak about priorities of the projects of Ukrainian rebuilding. 4 months ago in London, on the first conference concerning Ukrainian recovery and rebuilding, we agreed together with senior economists and leaders of European Committee, international finance organizations, and other authorities, 3 points. First point is that Ukraine needs not recovery and even not only rebuilding, but total modernization of Ukrainian infrastructure, government authorities and institutions, and other spheres, economy, etc. Second point was that Ukraine should get leadership in this process, and Europe should let Ukraine to formulate its vision for a future and to give Ukraine possibility to realize this vision with the help of European Union. And the third point was start now. Means we shouldn't wait until Ukraine will defeat together with our partners with Russia. We should start now. Means May, or at least in June, or maybe in November. 4 months later, we again speaking about rebuilding, starting after the win over Russia, and that European Union should make its own institutions in order to help Ukraine. My first question to my colleagues is, what do you think about priorities for Ukraine and Central Europe concerning rebuilding and modernization of Ukraine? Jakub.
Thanks. Thanks for a kind introduction. I'd just like to let you know I'm wearing 2 hats at OSW. One is the China program, the other is the connectivity program, which I'm coordinating, which is basically coordinating our transportation-related efforts within the institution. So I'll be happy to answer about China itself, but I'm here more.
Actually, my question concerning China was because you have the very good cover picture on your LinkedIn with a map of Chinese way without Ukraine on this map.
That's the Chinese map, not
yeah,
mine.
I understand. But it's usual question for Ukraine. We have the great place, great geography, but we do not use it for Ukrainian growth, economic growth. So what do you think about this?
Thanks. If you allow, I'll first address
Sure.
your main question. I've had a lot of talks with people dealing with infrastructure and logistics recently, both in Poland and Romania and Czech and Slovakia. So just a few takeaways from me. The first major takeaway is on general issues. and the importance of diversified transport networks for the economic resilience of economies. That's a key lesson not only for Ukraine, but also for the whole Central Europe. And here I think railway connections play particularly important role. Is that what we see now with the blockade of the Black Sea ports is that Ukraine needs a rapid rebalancing of its transport networks. That is key for any type of economic activity. That's what I heard. There was a conference in Warsaw on rebuilding process. In each and every panel, this issue popped up. Trade, agriculture, investments inside Ukraine. Every businessman I talked to talked about solving transportation issues first, because without this you cannot rebuild, because you cannot move goods into Ukraine or out of Ukraine. You'll be having very hard time to invest if you want to invest in manufacturing capacities here in Ukraine, because you will not be able to move these things out safely. So, and I think judging from how the transportation networks adapted to this new situation, I think railway is particularly important. We have a limited capacity on railway connections between Ukraine and Central Europe, but up to this capacity, I think there are very nice positive case studies. For example, Kryvyi Rih and ArcelorMittal, which maintain 50% of its capacity precisely because of a quick change of logistic chain through the Polish-Ukrainian border and up to Polish ports. Key lesson for Ukraine to diversify, and I think everybody understands this in Ukraine now, that this diversification is needed, but also for Central Europe. And that's, I think, that's another major call for all kinds of intra-Central European connectivity initiatives, including the 3Cs initiative, the connectivity dialogue within the V4, is that if we imagine a much more risky geopolitical environment with possible disruptions of our networks, just imagine if a conflict escalated on the Black Sea and Romania being cut off from Constanța port, that would be totally destructive for their economy. So we need to kind of build this economic resilience now also within Central Europe. The second point is on the thing you've actually raised already, that we need rebuilding to start now. We cannot afford to wait for the political conclusion of the or military conclusion to the conflict. There is a lot of business opportunities. I saw a lot of people in trade and logistics and transports that they're already connected. The Ukrainian side and the Polish side, the Romanian side. Of course, the main bottlenecks are at the border crossings. These were heavily underinvested for years, not prepared for this kind of flow of goods. But I think the biggest concern I hear on behalf of the business communities and people that actually have cargo to move, but are still not sure about investment prospects. And I'm not talking about, honestly, like talking in Poland, it's not about people fearing of Ukraine failing, but rather people fearing that the Ukraine will prevail, which is a good thing, but then unblock the ports, and all the flows that are coming to the ports, to the railways, elsewhere, will just go away. So my usual reply is that no, I mean, after the war, Ukraine will rebalance economically towards Europe, and the whole rebuilding process and the European integration will generate a huge amount of cargo and flow, so it's worth to invest now. But I think I would say I think it's the responsibility for both Central European governments and Ukraine to provide the businesses, terminal operators, port operators, rolling stock operators, with a clear message that these flows will not go away. You know, that Ukraine needs to diversify and so on.
But actually we have three different strategies up to now. One strategy is to think not only about rebuilding logistic infrastructure, but for example to modernize it as itself just now. meaning to build railroads in accordance with European standards instead of rebuilding traditional post-Soviet standards or Russia standards. First option. Second option is to think about de-producing Ukrainian agriculture and other materials in order to have less dependence on the logistics. Second way for us. And third way, to move Ukrainian manufacturing and producing out of Ukraine to Europe in order to have less problems inside of Ukraine. What do you think? In accordance with Polish experience, because I think you know that for us, for Ukrainians, Polish way to European Union is a kind of standard, basic case to understand, to learn and to use. So now, what do you think the best strategy for Ukraine now?
Well, I've sent the organizers a map, and if it's there, I'll be really happy to show it, but if it's not there, that's fine. Is there a chance for us to see it? Okay. Okay, I'll go ahead just quickly. I don't think deindustrializing Ukraine is the way forward. We need a sustainable, yeah. So this is the map of the TEN-T network, the Trans-European Transport Network, published by the Commission in June. For those of you who don't know, this is the most important map in terms of transport infrastructure because the corridors mentioned here have a fast track to access EU funds. And this is crucial. This is the crucial document that the EU is working on now. We have, luckily, Ukraine much more included. But I'd like to just draw your attention to Lviv and the position of Lviv here. I think the way it's structured now makes this part of Ukraine, at least at the first phase of rebuilding, the low-hanging fruit in a way. I mean, if you build normal standard gauge, European gauge railways from Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania into Lviv, that's not the total overhaul of the Soviet infrastructure. It's just starting with achievable things. You'll have a potential for another Central European industrial hub that is linked with Košice, with Silesia, with Ostrava. You'll have a potential for this Central European industrial hub to have an additional Ukrainian part. And I think it makes sense, especially since there's a lot of business in Ukraine relocating to this region now. There will be we are all in Lviv now, 9 months into the war, and it's relatively stable. It's just a good, selling point for investors that you can actually do this. So that would be my short answer. Just starting with Western Ukraine, focusing on infrastructural investments there, and then you have a springboard to go forward with linking the rest of Ukraine. Just one additional point, the last point, I don't want to monopolize this, is that if you build standard gauge, normal infrastructure in Lviv in this way, Lviv will become the biggest Ukrainian logistics hub, because that's where the broad gauge and the European gauge will meet. So you need all this kind of this, the handling capacity located there, which will be a great economic growth factor in itself.
We consider this as one of the worst scenarios for Ukraine, actually, and I hope we will have a discussion on the next wave. Veronika, what do you think? What should be priority for Ukraine now in cooperation with Central Europe partners in order to modernize and rebuild Ukrainian infrastructure?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk about such an important topic. Basically, then thinking about this session and thinking about the question that we have, that Andrii posed, I wanted to ask several. First, what? Rebuilding versus modernization. It's basically, I think it's apparent that just rebuilding, just restoring what we had has no sense. It doesn't have no sense both in short term, because we are like returning to the past and spending money that we will have to re-spend again, because we are aiming EU integration, because we are aiming competitive economy. It means we need to go into new technologies. So then we are rebuilding anew under new modernized technologies, or we are building something completely new, as we just discussed with these new infrastructural projects, because the war forced us to rethink all the infrastructure network in Central Europe, and that will give us new opportunities for linkages. Just for your discussion, how to say why we need these, and it will be used. It's not only because Ukraine will develop fast, but also because most likely, even on the Chinese map, we will see Ukraine as a transit country after the victory in the war, because I hope so much that Russia will become much less attractive transit country after the Ukrainian victory. It's already a problematic country, but if you look at the China now, they transit most through Russia. That has to be changed. Basically, so what? Building in new, rethinking, modernizing. Then when? Now. We cannot wait for the victory to start, but also why now? Because we have to discuss with all stakeholders now. We have to develop framework now. We have to agree on general standards now. We have to have a vision to develop this business with people who are living in the cities that will be rebuilding, with civil society, with international actors, national government now, because then we still cannot invest a lot immediately because it can be destroyed. We can have a joint vision, and that's why you're saying that we are 4 months afterwards is still no agreement on the basic things. That's a bad news, because we are losing time basically. And why we need this general vision? Because we have a task that is beyond our current capacity. We cannot be on the path-dependent way of development, because if you look at the path, it would look impossible. But we have to make it possible, just because it's our life. We cannot wait for next 100 years to absorb the amount of money that we need to absorb to return to the normal life. It means that it should be a new layer. Pekar was good saying about that. So basically we need to move to the next vision, more upper vision of the development. It means that it should be horizontal network, but horizontal network agreed on the same principles and agreed on these development. And for that we need a new actor, as a civil society, to monitor, to watchdog, to provide trust, because one of the major issues for Ukraine is a trust. We are not very good in moving steadily in reforms. If you look on the 30 years, you see the huge path that we passed. But if you look at the short term, our way is so curvy that sometimes we are just getting crazy. Just yesterday's news about nationalization, non-nationalization, something with enterprises showed that, my God, what is that? So we need actors that are trusted, and civil society is a trusted actor in Ukraine, to monitor, to watchdog, to add the dimension that gives a common consensus. We need inclusive communication. It's not top-down, we are saying what we are doing. It's also bottom-up, it's a discussion. And money. Who pays? I would like Russia to pay all money that taxpayers, Ukrainian or foreign, give us. But I think that the private money should be one of the key, especially then we are talking about business projects, talking about infrastructure, about something that can bring money. And here we have to think about insurance of that. And
we'll be back to this question concerning funding of the rebuilding. Thank you, Veronika. Michal, what I want to ask you, what do you think, considering your deep understanding both Ukrainian situation and situation in Central Europe, what do you think should be priority for the Central Europe countries in help to Ukraine to rebuild its infrastructure?
Okay, thank you. I can actually really speak about Czech Republic, about Czech priorities, priorities of my country, which is actually quite a bit more complicated than in the case of Poland, because we don't share the border with Ukraine. So the infrastructure projects such as railways are not really the priorities for the Czechs, and it's actually the discussion that's in the Czech Republic at the moment is actually more about energy dependency on Russia, and how to get rid of this. We have concerning this, we have actually quite an interesting experience in our country, which I think can be useful for future to learn some lessons. Because very often, like in the Czech Republic, in the Czech society, there was this tendency to talk about business that's or trade that shouldn't be mixed with politics, and that of course concerns Russia especially. And there was for a very long time this sort of politics of Russia first on both Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but also on the Czech Ministry of Industry and Trade, and this was actually quite a huge problem. And even after 2014, this led to questioning the anti-Russian sanctions. And there was a substantial lobby of big Czech business that had their businesses in Russia, and we were only very slowly reorienting towards Ukraine after 2014, despite the reforms and all the everything that happened in Ukraine and Russia. When talking about present day, this actually changed quite a lot. We had quite a space to change it before the full-scale invasion started, because we had several huge conflicts with Russia. Especially the most important was the explosions of ammunition depots in eastern Czechia, which led to expulsion of basically whole Russian embassy from Prague, and after this, this sort of reorientation was basically completed, and it's especially true after the election last year, when the government changed. So what's the point is that it's actually basically all about politics, and considering and it's also sort of about chances, because the election last year, they were won by the current coalition by a really narrow margin, by basically a few thousand votes, and the situation would be much more different if the former government of Mr. Babiš would stay in force. So we have strong support of Ukraine, strong support of reconstruction of Ukraine, and of all those projects, of course, military help, which is extremely important, and in this particular case, we are supporting supporting precisely the same as other Central European countries, most of them like Poland. So the priorities are basically very similar. It is necessary, first of all, of course, to modernize Ukraine, to get the official Czech position is this is a huge opportunity, especially for Czech business. But for this, we of course need to promote Ukraine, to get guarantees. Of course, we talked about the insurance and all those things, which are of course extremely important. But also, I wanted to mention one last thing. We should think about still. There are from what I know, there was quite a discussion in Czech Republic and in Czech institutions that there are quite a problems in communication between Ukrainian side and foreign partners, in this case with Czechia, and this is also one of the huge issues that needs to be solved. This was
what exactly?
This particular problem was actually about the strategy of reconstruction of Ukraine. We know for quite a long time the Czech side wanted to focus on Dnipropetrovsk region, Dnipropetrovsk Oblast for the reconstruction as a priority region for us, and we have some.
Not only Lviv.
Yeah, that's right. Because we've already had some projects there, and we didn't want it, for example, some region at the sea, because you know we are a landlocked country, so there. So there are projects. Those are things that we can't really do. And then there was this conference in Lugano, and suddenly the Czech flag was on Luhansk Oblast, and no one really knew how it happened. So also like those issues with communications also really need to be addressed. And
but it's a question of few months, I hope, that you'll have this chance. But going back to infrastructure, for sure, Ukraine and the Czech Republic do not have a common border, but still, Ukrainian business, for example, considered Prague as one of the hubs for the relocation. And for example, train between Kiev and Prague was announced, but then cancelled, for example. And we still have to go to Przemysl and then to Krakow in order to get to Prague, for example. Maybe it's a question for sure of communication between our institutions, but it is also a question of horizontal connections. You see, can I ask Tana, Alexandra, join us with discussion? For me, it's a very interesting situation. Ukrainian business community, for example, the biggest Ukrainian business community board is now made their representative offices and branches in Barcelona, in Valencia, in Prague, in Warsaw, in Wrocław, in Krakow, in Munich, around all European countries besides of Romania. It's very interesting for me because I know that many Ukrainian businesses moved this time to Romania. And I know, Tana, Alexandra, that you are the director of the Center of European Expertise for Romania and Brussels. You have offices both in Romania and Brussels, yeah? Am I right? So tell me, please, what do you think could be the best cases, Romanian cases for Ukraine concerning adaptation of Ukrainian infrastructure for European integration process now and after the war? What can we learn from the Romania experience?
Yes, thank you very much, and it's a very interesting debate. I'm really sorry that I was not able to come there physically. As you were mentioning, indeed, our Center of Expertise also has offices in Brussels. This week in Brussels, we are voting the REPowerEU, so the European Union plan to tackle the energy crisis. And I had, unfortunately, to stay here in Brussels for the vote. It is indeed a very valid point, the one that you raised, and it makes me go actually a bit back to the beginning of the debate, because I was listening to the other panelists, and I can't agree more with the fact that when we are discussing about a recovery plan in general, regardless if it is post military conflict or you know, a pandemic, for instance, or you know, a conflict that basically is causing the loss of lives and also the destruction of basic infrastructure, we cannot talk about a proper recovery and strategic plan if we don't have three components. So first of all, if we don't focus on solving the urgent and essential problems, so you know, focusing on now, on repairing, then you have, you know, the second perspective in mind that you need to put forward is, you know, the short-term measures, so the rapid reconstruction, so to say, which means that here you have to focus on what the other panelists were mentioning regarding the physical infrastructure, so, you know, the road, the transport, the rail infrastructure, but also I would add another dimension on the social infrastructure, so everything that is related to the virtual so to say, infrastructure, and I will immediately go back to that. And the third, you know, step that you need to have in mind, and the third priority would be on the long term, so on increasing resilience. So I would actually consider that a successful recovery plan should repair, should recover, and should enhance resilience. So those would be the main three ingredients. And if we start from this, let's say, from this logic, then, you know, the priorities that we need to set forward become, you know, pretty straight, because we are focusing indeed, when we think about repairing, we think about, you know, the proper infrastructure and essential needs that we have for the population. So, for instance, water supply, the rail infrastructure for the transport and for the agricultural sector, but also for the transport of the citizens. Then if we look at the, you know, short-term measures in terms of the reconstruction, here we look, of course, at the reconstruction of the roads, but we also need to look at the housing. So we need to look at raising the housing or raising the health infrastructure issues and the educational infrastructure issues. So this would be more or less how we reconstruct the whole picture of a country that needs to support itself. And then if we look on the long term, we also need to think about this virtual, so to say, hybrid infrastructure, which means, for instance, the infrastructure of the public administration services. Because if we look on the long term and we need to attract investors and we need to, you know, make the economy work, we also need to have the capacity to implement the project and also to be able to attract more funding. Now, I would say that from, you know, the Romanian perspective, Romania, you know, at the moment, as we speak, is actually on the point of implementing, as all the other EU member states, a national recovery and resilience plan post-COVID. And interestingly enough, those national recovery plans also focus on, you know, some of the elements that I was mentioning already to you, which would be actually an ideal basis for having the interest of developing cross-border projects with Ukraine. So I would say, for instance, that if we think of a you know, purely selfish economical perspective, each country in the European Union, especially those that are having their border directly linked with Ukraine, should have an interest to start investing in Ukraine in order to be able to, you know, develop these types of cross-border projects that would help both economies. how the Romanian, you know, experience could really help on that. I think that also here I would have, like, so to say, 3 lines of action. First of all, you know, in terms of the government speaking, so if we speak about this recovery plan, I would truly like to see, and I know that the Romanian government has been supportive and, you know, in terms of everything that has been done in order to welcome the refugees, together with the civil society, of course. But we need actually more of a strategy that it should be elaborated in order to understand exactly how the Romanian government plans to properly develop these relationships with Ukraine and to start building projects. So if I put forward the example of the National Recovery Plan for Romania, I would truly like to see how the government is trying to link the investments that are currently being conducted in Romania with further investments in Ukraine. Second point, it's also obviously everything about the business environment, because as you were mentioning, we will go to the funding question later on. The money will not only come from the European Union or will not only come from you know, the national budgets of the member states. They have to come from the business environment. And here the problem that you raised when you asked me the question, it is indeed a valid point, because I don't see indeed a long-term strategy on supporting the Romanian business environment into developing a direct, you know, contact with the Ukrainian businesses in terms of trying to have lines of investment. There is a platform of matchmaking between the European companies and Ukrainian companies that is launched by the European Commission. Maybe that could help in terms of, you know, the networking. But I really would like to see more efforts in this sense. And the third point, and here I will conclude for this first intervention, would be something that also the previous speaker also raised, the fact that the civil society is not only, you know, the guarantee that you will have a solid and proper implementation of the measures and of the reconstruction plan, but also it is a proper tool and facilitator for dialogue. So the civil society in Romania has done tremendous efforts during the war that we are experiencing in order to welcome the refugees, in order to help people in Ukraine with everything that it was needed with supply. We all were involved. I mean, all my friends, myself, we were all involved into, you know, donating, volunteering, going at the border. I think that the civil society has a lot of practices, you know, good and bad practices that have been experienced in Romania in terms of everything that you would like to hear from, you know, from absorbing funds to proper implementation to monitoring, you know, the government, to also looking at the business environment, that they could share to the Ukrainian civil society, and they could, you know, promote a stronger link together through dialogue.
Tana, Alexandra, I have here the question for you. When we try to elaborate Ukrainian modernization plan as a civil society institutions, the civil experts, we found out the following strange situation. From European point of view, Ukraine is a corrupted state, so the recovery institutions should be made inside of European Union, and Ukraine shouldn't obtain the real money for its own to make its own decisions because of corruption. From Ukrainian government authorities' point of view, Ukraine should lead this process of modernization and recovery, so the funding should be made inside of Ukraine, and Ukraine should consider what to do with these funds. We offered to our European partners to do not think this configuration as a dichotomy, to install Ukrainian civil society as the third part of this future triangle, in order to jointly with European institutions to realize anti-corruption agenda, and jointly with Ukrainian government authority to realize Ukrainian interest in this configuration. But we found out that this idea was not supported on the official level still, both from Ukrainian government authorities and from European Union. We heard a lot about that it's a right way, it's a great idea, but nothing happens. On the last conference in Berlin, Ukrainian government, Ukrainian civil society was not represented as experts or like institutions in this conference. So our voice is not working still in this configuration. What can you suggest? How can we realize this idea of inclusive process, including civil society?
Well, I have to say that the efforts in the sense are still being done by the other EU member states as well, because I have to tell you that, and I'm truly, sorry to tell you this, but in terms of also the recovery plans that I was referring to you about, so for the member states that are being funded by the European Union, there has been during the negotiations, which I also attended at EU level. There has been an extremely challenging, tension situation to be able to introduce the civil society as being an actor that could help, one, the governments to draft the plan, two, to implement basically the plan, and three, which is I think the most delicate part, to monitor the plans. And I also felt the reluctance here in both, as you were mentioning, the levels, so both at EU level and at government level. And in a way, well, I think that indeed it is not the way to go ahead. My suggestion in the sense, because I also, when you were telling me, I didn't really look at the two solutions, so to say, as being a dichotomy, because actually you could build them both. So if we look at the reconstruction plan, the EU funds will not be enough. It is obvious that the European Union would like to keep the money on themselves, as a management type of configuration, because they know that, and they want to ensure that the money is well spent. So from a logical perspective, let's say that it makes sense. But on the other hand, if you want, for instance, to launch, a business and private sector fundraising for different projects, this cannot be done only at EU level. This has to be done in shared management with the government, which makes really sense. My suggestion for the civil society at this point, and based on my experience as well in Romania, would be actually to build in parallel. So I would truly, I know that it is, a very complicated work to be done, but I believe that the civil society has the capacity to, become a promoter of different types of initiatives that at the moment cannot be, they are not really being, labeled as being EU-funded projects or, national budget types projects or so on. So I believe that the civil society should actually start building in parallel, creating a network, developing a network, being able to find direct contacts and partnerships with the civil society of other member states in order for them to be supported and to show that they have a direct influence and that they have the power of being able to implement the project. So I know that it sounds, a bit of the rebel child that is going against the parents, so to say, but this would be actually my advice, from a civil society perspective myself, to start building in parallel in order to show that the civil society has the mature approach that could really make the difference.
Thank you, Tana, Alexandra. So we will. I'm sure we prepare to this, but I'm sure that we will need to have our civil society representative office in Brussels, as you did, and for sure we should have the Ukrainian business community in Bucharest nearly. But going back to money, because it's a crucial issue now. Romania, Poland, Czech Republic, last several years shown the real taxation reforms for investors. For example, reform in corporate tax, which was which was prohibited for Ukraine, realized by Poland. Romania was one of the best cases on taxation on personal incomes, etc. So your countries are ready for investments, for foreign investments, for inside investments. And Ukrainian business consider all of your countries as their target countries for their own investments, for relocating for the open manufacturing business there, and even construction businesses, despite of huge European regulations. But my question is about Ukraine. How can we find possibility to fund that huge projects that we are now considering as a part of Ukrainian recovery, reconstruction and modernization plans? For now, we need more than $70 billion, or what I consider more than $17 billion for fast recovery of energetic system, of houses, of some critical infrastructure projects. Then we will need more than $100 billion for the recovery of Ukrainian infrastructure. Then we will need more than 100 for the modernization of railroads. We will need more than 8,000 kilometers of new railroads in Ukraine, and more than 50,000 kilometers of the roads. Polish experience is the best experience on the modernization of infrastructure, transportation infrastructure. You obtain more than $250 billion from European Union and from United States in order to make this modernized infrastructure. Which way for Ukraine do you consider the best?
I would focus on the like what can be done and should be done now, and like low-hanging fruits. I think no matter what source of funding you'll be thinking about, specialized recovery fund, international financial institutions, European financing facilities, you need to have well-structured and well-documented project plans, and you need to start this now. This is relatively easy because this can be done using laptops, but in order to apply for any money, you need to have this well-structured environmental impact, sustainability, financing, bankable projects. And I think it's a condition that needs to be met before we talk about actual construction and big money. And I think that's I would say well, my take on how Poland attracted and was able to tap so much funding is twofold. One is a very high motivation to build infrastructure, which is not the case in all Central European states, frankly speaking. If we talk about structural funds, so we have an envelope, and this amount of money that every country can spend, it's only theirs. Poland spends regularly about 105–110% of their envelope. So it's even more than it's been assigned to Poland. But there are other countries in Central Europe that use 60% of their money. The rest is lost, basically. So the motivation is one part, and I think Ukraine has it. There's no debate. But then the second part is administrative capacity to actually have well-structured projects and then to apply for money. And here we have a two-tiered kind of structure. One is we have a very robust central administration aimed at leveraging those funds. And then we have local governments that also have specialized teams that structure this and apply for this. And then the third one is about all types of consulting companies that work as intermediaries between the funding mechanisms and donors and the government itself. Lots of capacity, which by the way can be, and we are discussing this, the Polish capacities can be effectively employed in Ukraine. That's that's a kind of a shortcut. But I think we need to work on this now. It's like this is the job we need to do now, because after the money appears, we will need to be ready with like a 50 or 100 well-structured projects that can be started right away.
Jakub, actually, you previously mentioned a kind of agile approach for rebuilding Ukrainian infrastructure, but it's one of the most critical issues for Ukraine. We do not know how Ukrainian map, social demographic, first of all, because we consider that real geographic map will be the same as it was 8 years ago. But what about social demographic map? Will we have again Kharkiv as the biggest Ukrainian city with 1.7 million citizens, or it will be the 0.7 million citizens city? Will we have, for example, a zone for food security for Saudi Arabia in Lugansk Oblast, or we'll have some Czech infrastructure project? We do not know, because we don't know where Ukrainians will live and where we'll have industrial parks, etc., etc. It is why many Ukrainian entrepreneurs are afraid to plan something, to prepare their investment plans now. They still waiting. We have huge motivation, but zero projects, almost zero projects. On each business conference, investment conference, we are trying to present perspectives that Ukraine could be a next big thing after the Poland for European Union. But still we cannot present something specific, something concrete. What to do, how to manage this situation?
Well, I like your framing of this being an agile approach. That is, I think the grand vision is needed, and Ukraine certainly needs to work in that. We are fully convinced and committed to actually for Ukraine to regain all the land and rebuild the whole country as such. I'll just say that if I imagine the rebuilding process, I think about cargo flows. I think about warehousing, factories that produce concrete and steel and cables and everything else. Some of that will be moved from the west. You need an industrial base for this to happen. You need a place when the whole thing will be stored, planned, and then moved.
It is why we need China in this map. It is why we think about 4PL operators here in Ukraine. We think about construction for Asia countries, for companies inside of Ukraine.
We've seen President Zelensky talking with a number of countries which are strong in terms of construction, Turkey, China, and elsewhere. All of those companies will have to have bases to start the operations. And I think that's why I'm so focused on those achievable goals now. Is that it's not that you should stop at this region, the Western Ukraine, which is relatively safe with a lot of people actually flowing in here. It's not about stopping here, but actually using the strength that this region has now to use it as a springboard to move to rebuild it later on. So it's kind of a preparatory work. Here, using the assets that are concentrated now, all the business that are located then temporarily, all the people that are living there, and use it as this opportunity to kind of prepare for the things that concern, of course, the whole Ukraine. That's the ultimate goal.
As a kind of quick win, because for sure, for Ukrainian vision, as a part of Intermarion, it should be the logistic network for 4 seas, including Azov Sea, including Odessa as our biggest hub for Chinese companies or something like that. Thank you, Veronika. What do you think? Why Ukraine, during even 8 years, we almost didn't have direct foreign investments? now we have a lot of promises, but zero money. We have again promises from European Union, but only for covering deficit of budget Ukraine, but not for the big infrastructure projects still. What do you think, what should we change in our policies maybe in order to have the access to funding?
That's a $1 million or billion question.
I think $100 billion question approximately.
Yeah, maybe 100 or 1 trillion. Basically, yes, it's one of the key questions why we saw such a good growth in trade, in exports, but almost no growth in foreign direct investments over the last 8 years. And it's too easy to blame the war and the loss of territories. The war was the factor, but was not the major factor. If we look at the surveys done by both Movchan and European business associations, the main CEOs, the main foreign investors are saying about judicial reform, about anti-corruption efforts or the lack of them, and that forms the business environment in general. That's what economists sometimes call fundamentals, and that is the fundamentals that are embedded in association agreement in the process of accession to EU. The Ukraine has to become the country in which the private property is the protection of private property is the absolute dominant of everything. The question is $1 billion, how to make that. We are trying, but the path is still very curvy. And I think that we have to return to this idea of civil society and the role of civil society in both watchdogging what's happening and communicating that internally and externally, because we are moving there, but the trust is so low, the uncertainty is so high that if we only allow the government to do it will not be trusted. Russia can easily ruin it with one story, and I'm sure that in this whole infrastructural process in reconstruction and modernization will be a lot of still crises related to corruption. But how the whole society react on that will define the path. So, frankly, we need to build not only cement factories, but also like the stone trust in our non-corrupt future. And for that, basically, judicial reform. Because even corruption, it's not the issue of corruption per se, it's that non-working judiciary that cannot enforce laws. We have good laws, European laws in many cases. If we just enforce them, I'm sure that both Ukrainian investors and foreign investors will come. And Ukrainian will be the first to come and to invest, because of this certainty. Yes, demography now made a huge challenge that we do not know how to answer. But basically we can make a foresight. We can imagine Ukraine that we will build and we will get it. But that requires trust and rule of law in which we all trust. Not that we do not, but others will do, but we also behave like that.
Yeah, thank you, Veronika. I can say for our audience that in Ukraine we have now huge discussions between analytical centers. What is the core of Ukrainian corruption? My consideration is that this corruption, it's not only basing on Ukrainian history or post-Soviet post-Soviet history of Ukraine, but also it has economic basis. We have really low level of economic freedom. We are a very poor country compared to Poland, for example, and we will lose to Poland in terms of GDP each decade after the Soviet Union stopped. So this economic basis of corruption means that we really have good European laws, but still have not appropriate taxation system. A lot of state-owned enterprises. We have very close custom, etc. And my question to all of you in few words, and Tana, Alexandra, maybe you can tell me first, what should we change in Ukraine to prove Romanian, Polish, Czech Republic business to enter Ukraine, to start partnership with Ukrainian companies, to invest in Ukrainian business, to open manufacturing in Ukraine? What do you think? How can we prove Romanian business? Tana, Alexandra.
Well, I think that it has to be a very encompassing plan and strategy, because, for instance, I don't know whether even, countries such as Romania has managed to, properly demonstrate to all the business environment that, it is a country worth investing for, 100%. I mean, of course, there are some facilities that are being put on the table for the business investors, but the concerns that you were raising related to the corruption, they can also still be felt for instance, in my country, not at the same depth and not at the same degree, of course, but indeed there are issues that can still be seen. From my point of view, I think that even when we speak about this plan, in order to show this type of openness, you need to show, first of all, consistency and coherence. So basically, this whole strategy and the ambition that you have, it has to also be complemented by the fact that you don't only want to build for now, you don't want to really, recover now, but you really want to build something resilient that will really last for the long term. I mean, the business environment, they usually want to see a safe space to invest, so yeah, safety, and also they want to have a long-term perspective. So they're not thinking, in short-term investments. I mean, they are, of course, but with a long-term benefit, in the sense that if they are using the money to invest there, they need to make sure that they will really earn a profit. They will really see something coming back. So from this point of view, in order to see that, they also need to see that there are some facilities being put forward for them. So I think that opening the market for different types of investments would require, first of all, this type of coherence that I was referring to, in terms of the way that the public administration adapts, the way that you should become more, business friendly oriented, in terms of the way that the investors can set up their companies there, once the proper environment will allow them to do so. Then secondly, you should also develop, and this is, going back again to our initial discussion that we had, to the infrastructure. I mean, a company will not come in a country that, or in a region, so to say more specifically, that is not properly connected to the others, that doesn't have health facilities or educational facilities. And this is also the case, for instance, in Romania. I mean, I'm coming from a region in Romania that is the second poorest region, actually at EU level as well. And the investors are afraid to come there and are reluctant because there is no infrastructure. There are now no good health conditions or educational conditions. So it's clear that the company will fear to go and invest in those scenarios. So you really need to have a very broad oriented perspective that I know it doesn't really provide like concrete elements of now. So please come now because I'm offering you now this conditions. But you really have to have this whole encompassing approach in providing some fiscal facilities for them, providing the safety, and providing the necessary infrastructure for the business environment to develop. That would be in a nutshell.
Thank you, Tana. Actually, Ukrainian infrastructure is resilient. In fact, we are now in Ukraine, and we have audience with the lights, with everything. The same with logistic infrastructure. We are still resilient. Even the Ukrainian energetic system, after this terrible, horrible rocket attacks. But the question of efficiency of Ukrainian infrastructure and manufacturing, because we are losing to Poland, to Czech Republic, to Turkey, to our regional competitors, we are losing in many spheres because of the low level of productivity inside of Ukraine. Jakub, you'd like to comment this?
Just one thing that kind of popped my mind right away, so take it with a pinch of salt, on what can be done immediately. Drawing partially from the Polish experiences, but also China, which I professionally looked at, is that if there are systemic problems, one way in terms of corruption, lack of transparency, the law enforcement issues, they can be kind of temporarily bypassed by special economic zones, kind of special regimes, when there's maximum transparency, when you can appeal to international courts for the time being, when the civil society can be laser focused at in terms of transparency.
Actually, Ukrainian experience for these special zones is maximum corruption level. Now we have special regime for IT companies, so-called DSCT, and it shows ways for electronic residence, for the special taxation regime, for special rights, but it's only for one sector where we can control everything, and where there are zero of corruption because it's just IT, just virtual businesses. But my question, maybe because we are lack of time, I will ask you the last conclusions for 1 minute each, and I'd like to start with Michal. What do you think? Will, for example, insurance of foreign investments solve the issues for foreign investors or not?
Well, this is certainly one of the key problems that we are facing now, well, if we talk generally, then and looking from the point of view of Czech investors, for example, Czech business, then there are two basic key issues that were mentioned already. It's security. We don't know what will happen when the war will end, and the second one is the chronic systemic problems in Ukraine, like corruption, judiciary, rule of law, all those problems. So those are basically two key problems that the business actually sees in Ukraine. Well, this is actually a very good field for the EU and also for the countries, for member countries, to help Ukraine. But we shouldn't also think about this as a cure for everything. And there is a huge amount of homework in Ukraine to make it. We shouldn't really focus on striving for just the EU membership for Ukraine, but also to getting closer to the EU and building all sort of connections and standards, and even with some sort of longer perspective.
Thank you, Michal. Thank you, Veronika. Since we have motivation, what we should do next?
Work. Basically, insurance, I second you that insurance has to be a part of the story, because that what provides this more long-term perspective and safety and counterparts the risk. I like very much Jakub's suggestion that we need structured plans and the role for consulting companies, professional intermediaries who know how to make these projects jointly. As of the business environment, taxation, I do not think that taxation per se is the issue, more administration of taxation. Basically, further reforms, we did a lot with public easy opening digitally companies, with digital reporting, we did a lot. What we also have to do, a part of all that and hard working, try to sell ourselves, try to make a narrative that Ukraine is not as corrupt as we used to be. The problem of our civil society, we always say, great, you did it, but you have so much ahead, so let's focus what we have to do. We are not selling our achievements.
As Tana Alexandra said, to have infrastructure for business, we have everything.
Yes, but nobody knows.
Yeah.
Basically, the one thing that probably we should ask ourselves, but also our foreign partners, because not everybody will trust our stories. Sell good stories. Tell about DIA, tell about digital services, tell about opening business in couple hours, tell about everything online and transparent, tell about resilience in the time of the war. Make the story of successful Ukraine even now. That is, I suspect that is 50% of the success of the countries. Make a good story.
Yeah, thank you. Imagine even now, the speed of internet in Kiev, internet faster than in Warsaw. I like Warsaw very much, but you see, so Ukraine is resilient enough. But what's the next step? What we should do as a first step in order to have money and plans?
Well, just quickly in the special economic zones, I mean, it's still worth a try. I think Ukraine is different now, both in terms of transparency, digitalization of the state apparatus, and also the civil society oversight. I just, of course, preferably that would be structural reforms, law enforcement, transparency, rooting out corruption for the whole Ukraine to be a special economic zone for foreign businessmen. Yes. But you can see I'm kind of aiming at lower hanging fruit, something to start with. That's why I came with it. Just repeating the major points I had. Starting with doable things, making the grand plans concrete, and in kind of providing the investors, the donors, and everyone with a kind of a roadmap, with steps, when at the very end there's the grand vision that has been already presented by Ukraine. But you know, every journey begins with the first step. You need to have the first step structured and well explained and achievable to get things running. And that, by the way, includes planning in the first place.
Hope our joint way into future intermarian will be not so long as we saw on that research before our panel. Jakub Jakóbowski, Veronika Movchan, Tana Alexandra, Foarfa, yeah, from Romania, and Michal Lebduška. Thank you for my panelists. Yeah, thank you.